Good morning, everybody. This is Chris Barth. I'm the Fire Mitigation Education Program Lead for BLM Montana Dakotas and a member of the WiRē team. Thanks for joining the webinar today, and thank you to FAC Learning Network and the Landowner Homeowner Group for hosting the webinar. Today, we're going to share with you the Wildfire Research Team's innovative approach to fire adaptation. Several members of the WiRē team are going to be presenting today. They'll introduce themselves as we go through the presentation. However, we also have WiRē team members Patty Champ and Lilia Falk on the call. They'll also be available to answer questions at the end. So kicking it off, wildfire is a natural phenomenon, yet learning to live with wildfire is a social issue, so we need a social solution. For more than a decade, the Wildfire Research, or WiRē team, has been refining the process to understand how each community's path to fire adaptation is unique. Today, we're going to share our approach with you and explain why we feel it goes a step further to refine the issues for specific communities that face their own unique challenges to becoming fire adapted. We recently created a series of short illustrative videos that outline the WiRē team's innovative approach to helping communities adapt to fire. We don't have time to show the videos today, but we encourage you to visit our website or Facebook page to watch all 3 videos if you have not done so already. Next slide, please. So the current wildfire trends are concerning. Suppression costs and acres burned are increasing. Homes continue to burn. More than 12,000 destroyed in 2017, which is 4 times the annual average. Plus there's other costs such as health effects related to wildfire smoke exposure. Can we break this cycle? The WiRē team thinks we can. In our presentation today, we're going to describe an approach to tailor local wildfire education programs. It's an approach that is systematic, comprehensive, and uses social science. We learn from all the individuals in the community, not just the vocal few, about their perceptions about risk, attitudes about mitigation, and the relationship between the individual and the community. We apply our approach in a systematic manner that allows for replication across time and space. So why our approach? Because adapting to wildfire means real changes on the ground, creating defensible space and hardening structures, residents that have realistic expectations about how wildfire might play out in their community. The community understands and accepts fire management, such as thinning or prescribed fire. We want to dispel myths that can distract from productive discussion, and tell stories in a manner that foster productive community conversation, garner support, and attract sustained funding from varied sources. We also monitor changes over time, whether residents in a community are really adapting to fire, and quantify those outcomes. Next slide. The Wildfire Research, or WiRē team, is an interdisciplinary collaboration that includes researchers and practitioners from the U.S. Forest Service, BLM, U.S. Geological Survey, practitioners from West Region Wildfire Council, and a researcher from the University of Colorado Boulder. The WiRē team came into existence organically, evolving from ideas of several passionate wildfire practitioners and researchers. Initially, we were individuals who happened to be working on related projects, but through a synergy of our efforts, we formed a highly productive team. The researchers have found that working in partnership with practitioners improves their science by changing how they view problems and ask questions. And the practitioners recognize the benefits of science-based programmatic changes that help them understand and quantify programmatic outcomes. Next slide. Several of our team members attended a workshop that emphasized the importance of narrowing the knowledge transfer gap among researchers and practitioners, and this was really a foundational moment for some of us. We feel that a cornerstone of our collaboration is a commitment to applied research that yields more effective and efficient programs aimed to reduce wildfire risk and increase community adaptation to fire in the WUI. While our process has evolved over time, much of the data is consistent, which allows comparisons across geography, demographics, time, et cetera. Our process is also iterative, which means it's ongoing. It's a group journey of developing knowledge and turning it into action. The analysis that builds upon each other, and questions come from the practitioners and the research. Through frequent, open, trusting communication, we find shared areas of interest to work on. While the map on the screen focuses mainly on the work we've done in Colorado, our work is now expanding to other states. For example, working with Chelan Fire District 1 this year. Now I'm going to turn it over to Hannah.
Hi, everyone. This is Hannah Brentford-Smith from the University of Colorado. I'm going to describe the process by which we collect data in the communities where we work, and a detailed description of the process will unfold over the next several slides. But to give you an overview, we conduct our work using a 4-step process. The first step entails a letter announcing our efforts. This letter is an opportunity for introductions and for framing of the wildfire issue by practitioner partners. The letter tells residents that the practitioners will be driving to the community to conduct a rapid wildfire risk assessment and to expect a survey in the mail. Now, the second step are the rapid wildfire risk assessments. These assessments are conducted by looking at every parcel that has a residential structure on it within the community of interest. The third step is survey administration, and the practitioners send out the survey by mail with an address and postage paid return envelope. And then the fourth step, the data are analyzed and work on developing an understanding of what the data means begins. The data from the parcels and the surveys are merged together, analyses are conducted, guided in part by the interests and concerns of the practitioners and in part by the interests and concerns of the academics. And the presentation of the results are developed collaboratively between the researchers and the practitioners. Next slide. So after the step 1 letter has been sent out, the practitioners undertake step 2. The risk assessment is based on 11 attributes. Some characteristics are beyond the control of a household, and are likely shared among neighbors or even across neighborhoods, such as slope and background pools. Some characteristics are directly controlled by the homeowner. Some are less expensive to mitigate, such as the extent of dispensable space or the proximity of combustibles. Others are more costly to mitigate, such as the materials for construction of the buildings, the home. And others are particularly useful for response planning, including address, roads for access and egress, and driveway accessibility. The rapid wildfire risk assessments provide data that help us understand the conditions in the communities where we work. The assessment was developed by West Region Wildfire Council and Chris Garth, who just spoke, and based on fire science, and mostly based on the home ignition zone concept developed by Jack Cohn. The data are collected by the practitioner partners, and this process may entail the involvement of a local fire department. The data for this rapid assessment has evolved over time. Initial collection efforts in the field were using paper and pencil, and then we tried out using simple Android tablets with access databases, and recently we've adopted iPads. And each trial and error has helped us think in more depth about the goals and the limits of data collection and the data that we're using. Next slide. What these data allow us to do is to look at the conditions in a manner that matters to communities at risk. Today, there are many kinds of wildfire risk data available, mostly from satellite data, and most at a scale that's not applicable to homeowner decision-making. The data we use are consistent with the types of data that are often used to create community wildfire protection plans, CWPP. They're the kind of data that any fire-prone community would want to know for response planning, as well as for education and outreach efforts. CWPPs currently constitute the most common risk identification and planning tool for communities or volunteer fire departments or counties at risk of wildfire. Unfortunately, those data that are used to develop the CWPPs often sit on a shelf. And later in the presentation, James will describe how we're mobilizing these data to prompt action. So the process is rapid, about 60 seconds for each parcel. It is a census of the properties that have homes in a given area. The process creates a snapshot in time, providing a baseline understanding of the conditions in that community, and the results provide insights into relative risk. And finally, it's a useful approach for developing education tools to promote action, in part because it's low cost while yielding a big picture understanding of what's happening in a community. And the fact that it's low cost also opens the possibility of repeating the process for tracking change over time. Next slide. So in step 3 are the household surveys, and these provide the social data. The surveys are administered by our practitioner partners to all the assessed properties. In other words, we administer a census of all the households in the community of interest. Now, conducting a census is deliberate and different. So often in research, surveys are sent to a sample or a subset of households within a study area. In our case, we want to hear from as many of the community members as possible so we can understand the complexity within a community. So we send it to everyone. And the mailing of the survey follows specific mailing and tracking procedures to ensure high-quality data. And following the procedures yields additional benefits to the local practitioners. So first, the mailings provide opportunities for the practitioners to connect to residents. The process connects communities to local experts devoted to reducing risk and supporting community wildfire adaptation, so it builds local capital. And the tracking procedures also help the practitioners keep an account of their activities, as well as identify where their efforts are gaining traction and where they may need to focus more effort. And overall, we see relatively high response rates, which is noteworthy in an era when overall survey responses are on the downturn. Now, unlike much research, our approach is not a parachute-in research approach in which researchers collect data and then disappear back into the academic world. The data belong to the practitioner partners who share them for community and academic analyses. The practitioners are fully engaged in the process, and they participate in the process by which we refine a standardized instrument to attend to local needs. We use some core batteries of questions in our surveys, which are repeated across time and space, and this builds increasing capacity for us to compare across communities and expand our understanding. And we're at time, just as we're hoping residents are going to adapt to wildfire, we're adapting our practices to make them as efficient and effective as possible. And we're constantly learning. Next slide. So why do we want to gather parcel risk assessment and household survey data? Well, pairing up our assessment data and our survey data allows a range of analyses to conserve our practitioner partners. For example, how do people rate their own properties relative to the local practitioners, how they would rate them? And generally, we see that survey respondents underestimate their overall risk. And the 11 items in the assessment allow us to parse how each of the attributes contributes to the overall risk. So on the left, you can see the overall risk ratings comparing the rapid risk assessments by the practitioners in the lighter orange and the responses from the residents through the household survey in the darker red. On the right, you can see that we are looking at specific attributes. Here is the extent of defensible space, again, comparing the rapid risk assessment data from the practitioners in the lighter orange to the responses from the residents through the household survey in the darker red. So these data are the results of the full WiRē data set as of October 2017, with communities in 7 counties in Colorado. And we see similar patterns across study areas, but there is variation to this pattern, and we can tease that out and look at differences across communities. Next slide. So why is it important to community-specific data? We often hear from researchers and practitioners about the importance of community. And we know that practitioners often reflect on frustrations from hearing from some strong voices, but not always being sure whether or not those voices represent the sentiments of a broader community. So we've built our approach as a way to collect data that allows us to consider the breadth of voices within a community. So for example, if you look at the graphic on the left, it depicts respondents' expectations about whether the local fire department would save their home in San Miguel County, Colorado. We see that 50% of respondents in that county believe that the local fire department would save their home. Now, if we weren't all that interested in what was happening in the specific area, researchers might walk away saying, oh, the majority of study respondents expect the fire department would save their home. But when we look at it all together, we see that 25% of respondents thought it was not likely that the fire department could save their home. And another 25% responded that they did not know whether or not the fire department would be able to save their home. So when we're thinking about what's happening in a specific community and how best to tailor programs and efforts, that remaining 50% becomes a really important part of the story. And we can use the data from the rapid risk assessments, for example, to see if the specific conditions on the parcel or in the community might be related to these expectations. Now, when we look across our data, we see that there's a great deal of variation in responses at the individual level. You see that in the graph on the right. We're also able to see, since we're working across a lot of communities, that there's also notable variations by community. And when we compare across communities, we can identify what factors are associated with community-level variation. Next slide. And Jamie.
Sorry, I just took myself off mute. This is Jamie Gomez with the West Region Wildfire Council. I'm the Assistant Director and Acting Mitigation Specialist. Just if you're not familiar with the West Region Wildfire Council, we are a kind of wildfire-focused education outreach and mitigation-focused organization based in western Colorado. We work in a 6-county region. And as it kind of indicated in the map in one of the previous slides, we've been working with the wildfire research team since 2012. Obviously, our organization has grown and evolved quite a bit since then, and I want to focus in on these next few slides about how this, working with the wildfire research team has really informed and transformed our programs and the way we approach our overall work, working within communities across our 6-county region to reduce wildfire risk. But I just want to kind of start out by saying, I think generally speaking, from when we first got started with the working with the wildfire research team, our goals were fairly simple, I would say. One, we wanted to learn more about the communities that we work in, across our 6-county region. We wanted to move away from anecdote, just things that you kind of make assumptions about residents and people in the communities that we work with, move away from the anecdote and actually have some, hard objective numbers to deal with regards to, the thoughts, attitudes, risk perceptions, and things related to that. We also wanted to figure out ways to, improve our programs, tailor them to the needs of the communities that we work in, and overall, we just wanted to increase our impact. We wanted to see more wildfire mitigation happening, at the defensible space level, home hardening, defensible space up to, some of the types of projects that were identified in some of the numerous CWPPs in our region. So we just wanted to see a lot more work get done, and I think it was a hope that, working with the wildfire research team and taking an approach, a social science approach to this might help us do that. So over these next few slides, I'm going to go through a few examples, but I just want to step back for a moment and just mention that just overall, the very act of sending out surveys and asking residents what their concerns are, what they think about wildfire, what they think their risk is, what are the reasons why they aren't doing mitigation, all of those kinds of questions. That very ask of just asking the residents, I think changes a couple things. For one, it changes the way we approach it. It's a way for us to think about this as a social landscape as much as it is a fire shed or a fire, prone ecosystem. It also, what I've noticed is that people, the residents that we work with really appreciate being asked. And I think that can get lost here in all of this, that just the very act of asking someone changes the conversation from the get-go. So just, I think as a foundation to this entire discussion of how it's changed our programs and our work, I just wanted to mention that. And then obviously, internally, as far as our organization, we're small. We have 3 people. We're hiring another one right now. But it's also, it's kind of been mentioned that we are using, this information as a way to monitor how effective we are. And it's really just the overall process has kind of created I'd say a culture within our small organization of systematic data collection and really thinking about what are approaches that are working and what are not, and how can we learn from this using kind of a systematic data collection approach. So really, if we could go to the next slide. So as mentioned, we've worked in numerous fire districts in several different counties in our region doing these kinds of paired risk and social data collection efforts. Just want to highlight this one real quick. Within San Miguel County, which was previously mentioned, the town of Mountain Village comprises about 700 homes or residences within the overall study area of Telluride Fire Protection District. And what we had in that overall, within the town of Mountain Village, this kind of subset of the overall study area, we had a 41% response rate, which is, from what I understand, a pretty good response rate. So one of the assumptions that we had heard, or kind of those anecdotes, was that, you know, we don't really think that the people in Mountain Village want to cut trees. They're hesitant to do anything like that. They have aesthetic concerns. You know, there was kind of a general consensus among some of the folks that worked with that community that they just didn't want to cut trees. But when we actually got the surveys back, what we learned is, you know what, that's probably not actually true. We found out that, you know, just simply asking, 77% of that response rate within that town of Mountain Village area said that they actually are willing to cut trees. But what was actually, you know, a hindrance or a potential barrier to doing this kind of work was the HOA restrictions that they viewed as being a hindrance to them to actually take on the work necessary related to, you know, tree removal in particular. So, you know, it demonstrates here that, you know, perhaps the anecdotal evidence or the anecdote of that folks don't want to cut trees is not necessarily true all the time, and that's just one simple, you know, highlight of the fact that, you know, it's completely possible that there are other barriers out there. And since then, and since this time, the town of Mountain Village has basically started its own wildfire mitigation incentive program and has seen a significant increase in wildfire mitigation work throughout the entire town. So if we can go to the next slide, Lily. Another example, so one of the questions that is in the survey is related to the barriers, like we just talked about with the town of Mountain Village. So throughout our region, you know, we ask in a basic way, what stops you from reducing the risk on your property? And you know, as Hannah was mentioning, there's, you know, some trends across all of them, and then it's, you know, there are differences between the various communities that we work in. But overall, what, you know, some of the top answers are that, you know, homeowners lack specific info on what to do on the property. And then another answer is that they lack options for removing yard waste. So, you know, over the first few years of having a chipping program, a mobile chipping program, we had, you know, decent participation, but based on the fact that we kept seeing this lack of options for removing yard waste as a very high rated thing as to why folks aren't actually taking on mitigation work, we went ahead and basically revamped and changed our one of our community chipping program and made it a lot more accessible and some kind of user-friendly for folks to participate. And since that time, over the last 2 years, we've seen a huge increase in the amount of participation within the communities that had already been participating, as well as, you know, we're seeing more and more new communities signing up to the program. And so those are just a few different reasons or a few different examples of how working with the wildfire research team has transformed a program. And I know Lilia is on the phone and will be available to answer specific questions about the West Region Wildfire Council's work and how working with the WiRē team has been just an excellent thing within our program. But I'll go ahead and turn it over to James Meldrum to kind of continue this discussion.
Great, thanks, Jamie. So, hi everyone, I'm James Meldrum. I'm a research economist with the U.S. Geological Survey. And so one additional outcome that we want to mention involves working to improve outreach to individual homeowners. And so we do often see in the survey data, and as was mentioned previously, there is variation across communities, but this is a relatively general finding, that many residents perceive a lack of property-specific information as a barrier to them doing mitigation work on their own properties. So West Region Wildfire Council has conducted more than 6,000 of the rapid assessments that Hannah was describing a few slides ago. And while these rapid assessments do have many programmatic uses, we collectively wondered if we could be doing more to get the information back to the homeowners themselves. So in other words, we saw these rapid assessments as a potential opportunity to address this information need and to also increase homeowner engagement in mitigation activities. So our first step was to build these parcel-specific websites that detail the results of the rapid assessment for an individual home. So this slide here shows screen captures of these websites. And you also are welcome to write down this URL and use the test code test01 to see an example. And that would show you exactly what it would look like if a homeowner went. But the important aspects of these web pages is that the selected boxes will adjust to each property's assessments, and they show those 11 items that Hannah was describing earlier. And then the other important thing is that the sites end with a call to action with further follow-up with West Region Wildfire Council. And you can see that most notably with that giant blue box asking people to schedule a site visit. And just one little side note is that we just acquired funding from the University of Colorado to improve the design of these sites and to get them set up for more communities. So we're really excited, and this is something that we're hoping to be able to transfer from where we've done it to new places. So next slide, please. But we didn't just create the websites. And this really is demonstrating the value of the team's interdisciplinary collaboration. We also see this as an opportunity to explore relevant research questions. So West Region Wildfire Council and their partners are sending out these letters to residents that point each homeowner to their property's unique website. And you can see an example of these letters on the left side here. Through these letters, we're testing how the inclusion of different levels of personalized information affects the response to these letters. And you might not be able to see if it's a little small, but I'll walk through, and it's this box in the middle of the letter. So specifically, we're comparing the response to 3 types of risk ratings. Those for the whole community, those for the letter recipient's own property, and then also that for an average rating for the neighboring properties. So the properties right around that specific property getting the letter. And so this is still a work in progress, but the graphs on the right show some important preliminary results. Basically, we're seeing that the specific information being provided in the letters is affecting the response rates to them. So for example, in the top right, for people who are rated as extreme, or for people whose properties are rated as extreme, they're significantly more likely to follow up if they are told that than if that piece of information is not provided in the letter. So telling people that they're extreme makes the extreme people more likely to go to the website and find out more information. Similarly, and this is in the bottom right corner, telling people that their rating is higher than that of their neighbors appears to also make them more likely to follow up. Next slide, please. And so those results are really exciting to us. But at the same time, the real goal of these letters is not to just get people to a website, but to increase actual mitigation on the ground through encouraging homeowners to work with West Region Wildfire Council. And excitingly, West Region is definitely seeing an increase in engagement from the communities where residents receive these letters. It is important to note that these letters aren't the only way that West Region is trying to connect with homeowners in these communities. So this slide does not show pure experimental results. But that said, they have seen a substantial uptick in the number of cost-shared mitigation projects and scheduled site visits right around the timing of the letters. And this is in communities that previously had low levels of activity. So we're currently working toward building a robust and large enough data set that we can explore some of those more detailed dynamics more rigorously. But at this point, this certainly is suggestive that the outreach is not only getting people to the websites, but is also moving on these next steps. So this really is just a quick snapshot of this one outreach effort. And true to our model, we do hope to publish this in academic journals, but also to spread the word in applied groups like this, and even support other folks in similar efforts to the extent that we do have the capacity to do that.